Hi, I'm Dr. Elizabeth Thomas. I'm an assistant professor at the UCLA School of Nursing, teaching in the Adult Gerontology Nurse Practitioner program. And I'm here to talk to you about the theoretical foundation of different disciplines at the invitation of Dr. Lynn Woods. So let's start by looking at a history of science genogram. Now, you all think of genograms in terms of our own families, and this is sort of the same thing. And if we look at the history of science from a genographic perspective, it really started from both theistic and then non-theistic perspectives. And from the theistic perspective, ethics came, and then also philosophy. And so, but philosophy also came from a non-theistic perspective. So both of them contributed, both theistic and non-theistic ideas contributed to philosophy. And physics was really the first science that developed from that philosophical perspectives, from both non-theistic and theistic perspectives. And from physics, we got math, of course, was really part of that. And then from physics, chemistry, biology, and other natural sciences evolved. And out of both chemistry and biology, we got medicine and nursing. And sort of off on a separate branch, we get social sciences. And out of the social sciences, we get psychology, sociology, and economics. So that's sort of a bird's eye view of the history of science. So let's start with some review of important terms when we're talking about the philosophy of science, regardless of the branch of science that we're talking about. First, ontology. This is a branch of metaphysics that's concerned with the nature and relation of being. And it's a particular theory about the nature of being, or the kinds of things that have existence. And Aristotle called this the first philosophy, the nature of being, ontology. The next important term that we need to understand when we're looking at theoretical perspectives or philosophies of science is epistemology. And this is the study or a theory of the nature and grounds of knowledge. And especially when we're talking about the limits of knowledge or the validity of knowledge. So before we start talking about nursing and nursing knowledge and the philosophy of nursing, we're going to look at a lot of different other sciences. So starting with that first one that came about, which was physics. So the philosophy of physics. What is physics? It's the study of matter and energy and how they interact. So the metaphysical and epistemological questions that come up in physics are about causality, determinism, and the nature of physical law. So some of the important topics in modern physics include physical cosmology, space, time, the origin and ultimate fate of the universe. Another broad field is thermodynamics and statistical mechanics, and these physicists work on energy, work, randomness, and information. And then there's quantum mechanics. So some rival interpretations about how quantum mechanics works. And of course, this all makes me think of that great TV show, The Big Bang Theory, because the main characters there, two of them are physicists, and makes for a very interesting sitcom, if nothing else. So that major field that broke off from physics or developed out of physics is mathematics. And the philosophy of mathematics, they look at the relationship between logic and mathematics. So there's formal logic theory, and then there's set theory. And logic, of course, is a major subset of philosophy in general as well. And then mathematical truth seems to be inevitable, but actually their source remains elusive. And mathematicians spend a lot of their time, in the true sense of those who are mathematicians, looking at proofs. How do they prove what they are doing? And those of us who just do regular everyday math, we accept what they have already done through their proofs. But that source of mathematical truth is still actually really rather elusive. For those of us who just do everyday math, we don't think of there being very much conflict or different schools of thought in mathematics, but actually there are many schools of thought in mathematics, and these are just some of the recent schools of thought. There's mathematical realism, anti-realism, Platonism, as in Plato, empiricism, monism, logicism, formalism, psychologism, intuitionism, constructivism, finitism, ultrafinitism, structuralism, embodied mind theories, new empiricism, Aristotelian realism, fictionalism, social constructivism or social realism, quasi-empiricism, Popper's two senses theory, philosophy of language. Math is the language of science. So there's a lot of things about mathematics that are much more unsettled or less set than we as non-mathematicians would think there would be. So some of the topics in the philosophy of chemistry that are current are chemical symmetry, chirality of like amino acids, nucleic acids, all the sugars, which sugars are all found exclusively as single enantiomers, and I didn't pronounce that correctly, in organisms, and then quantum mechanics that explain chemical phenomena. So the philosophy of biology is a subfield of the philosophy of science, which deals with the epistemological, metaphysical, and ethical issues in the biological and biomedical sciences. And it came about really with the rise of neo-Darwinism in the 1930s and 1940s, with the discovery of the structure of DNA in the 1953, and then more recent advances, of course, in genetic engineering. So the philosophy of biology has been evolving, and it really only emerged as really an independent field of philosophy in the 1960s and 1970s. Some of the key ideas studied in the philosophy of biology include the reduction of all life processes to biochemical reactions, the incorporation of psychology into a broader neuroscience, and basic questions such as what is life itself and what makes humans uniquely human and different from other life. The philosophy of social science has developed over a period of time, and it really is the study of the logic and method of the broader social sciences, which include sociology, anthropology, and political science. Philosophers of social science are concerned with differences and similarities between the social and the natural sciences, causal relationships between social phenomena, possible existence of social laws, and ontological significance of structure and agency. So, for example, do social structures determine an individual's behavior, or does human agency? In this context, agency refers to the capacity of individuals to act independently and make free choices, whereas structure refers to factors which limit or affect the choices and actions of individuals, such as social class, religion, gender, ethnicity, and so on. So when you think of the primacy of structure or agency, um, and how they relate to the very core of social ontology, think about what's the social world made of, and what is cause in the social world and within the individual, and what is an effect. And then let me just direct you to a major theory, one of the last grand theories out there in sociology, which is one of the social sciences, and that's Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory, and it deals with these exact concepts. And so I direct you to perhaps look into that theory as one theory that's actually very useful potentially in nursing research, and that is Albert Bandura's social cognitive theory. It is a sociological theory, but many nurses have found it very useful in their research. Another social sciences is psychology, and the philosophy of psychology has epistemological concerns about the methodology of investigation, mentalism, or behaviorism, or a compromise, and is self-report a reliable data gathering method for research? Now, this is always a question when we do our research as nurses, because a lot of things, the only way you can gather the data is by self-report, by questionnaire, having people answer questions about their behavior, because not everything can be observed. And then, can first-person experiences be measured objectively, which is sort of the flip of that same question. The things that people do, can you measure them objectively? The philosophy of psychology is also interested in questions about the nature of mind, brain, and cognition, which, when you think about it, that thing in our head really has these three components: mind, brain, and cognition. The philosophy of psychology is commonly thought of as a cognitive science or philosophy of the mind. Are humans rational creatures? What psychological phenomena come up to the standard required for calling it knowledge? And what is innateness? What is that concept? Which is really a big concept, and one that's difficult to get your brain and your mind wrapped around. Economics is also a science, and there is a philosophy of economics. And in the philosophy of economics, philosophers of economics ask, what kind of a truth claim is made by economic theories? Are we claiming that the theories relate to reality or to perceptions? And how can or should we prove economic theories? Must every economic theory be empirically verifiable? And can economic theories lay claim to the status of an exact science? That's some of the things that these theorists ask. In the philosophy of economics, there are a number of theories, including game theory and decision theory. Now, game theory and decision theory are shared among a number of philosophies. So, mathematics, economics, and philosophy all share game theory. And decision theory is also shared among several different disciplines. So, decision theory, for example, looks at the nature of choice, preference, rationality, risk, and uncertainty. Game theory is shared with mathematics, economics, and philosophy. Now, distributive justice. The ethics of economic systems deal with the issues such as what is right, just, and fair to keep or distribute economic goods. And economic systems as a product of collective activity allow examination of their ethical consequences for all participants. So ethics and economics relate ethical studies to welfare economics. So it's been argued that a closer relation between welfare economics and modern ethical studies may enrich both areas, even including predictive and descriptive economics as to rationality of behavior given social interdependence. So ethics and justice overlap disciplines in different ways. So justice in economics is a subcategory of welfare economics with models frequently representing the ethical social requirements of a given theory. So some of the non-mainstream economic theories include Bhutanese gross national happiness, and then feminist perspectives on economics. So these are some of the more modern day thinkings about economics. So now we're getting into more familiar territory, the philosophy of medicine. And this came out of biology initially, but it does have direct roots, of course, from those theistic and non-theistic branches of philosophy. So it includes its own epistemology, ontology, and metaphysics, and of course ethics that overlap strongly with bioethics. It's distinct from a philosophy of healthcare, which has its own ethical and political issues of healthcare practice and research. So the epistemology of medicine is that the study of knowledge is how we come to know about the effects of medical intervention, the accuracy of diagnostic tests, and the predictive value of prognostic markers. What is the epistemological value of the hierarchy of evidence in evidence-based practice? So this is the current philosophy of medicine epistemology. The ontology of general medical science, which includes a set of logical definitions of very general terms that are used across medical disciplines, including disease, disorder, disease course, diagnosis, and patient. The scope of the ontology of general medical science is restricted to humans, but many terms can be applied also to other organisms. The ontology of general medical science provides a formal theory of disease that is elaborated further by specific disease ontologies. So for each disease, there is a specific disease ontology, which extends it, including the infectious disease ontology and the mental disease ontology. This ontological revolution occurred and it made modern disease possible and is very much based in Cartesian dualism, which is still very discernible in medicine. It separated body from mind. and mind was thought superior to body as it constituted the uniqueness of the human soul, the province of theology, and body was thought to be inferior to mind as it was mere matter. And medicine simply investigated the body as machine. Now, we know that modern medicine doesn't completely believe this anymore, but these roots are still strongly rooted in today's medical science. So, modern medicine, unlike Galenic medicine, which dealt with the humors, number 4 humors, is mechanistic. For example, when a bit of solid matter, such as a poison or a worm, impacts upon another bit of matter when it enters the human body, that sets off a chain of motions, giving rise to disease, just as when one billiard ball hits another billiard ball, the latter is set in motion. When the human body is exposed to the solid pathogen, it falls ill, giving rise to the notion of a disease entity. Later in the history of modern medicine, particularly by the late 19th or 20th century, in nosology, which is the classification of disease, the most powerful is the ideologically defined approach, as could be found in the monogenic conception of disease, which covers not only infectious agents, bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites, prions, but also genetics and poisons. It constitutes, since Pasteur and Koch, the dominant paradigm of disease and its causation in clinical medicine, sidelining in the main its competing paradigm found in epidemiology. While clinical medicine is concerned with the ill health of the individual patient when he or she succumbed to disease, epidemiology is concerned with the pattern of diseases in populations in order to study their causes as well as how to manage, control, and ameliorate the problems identified under study. Clinical medicine is presented above as part of a reductionist approach to disease, based ultimately in Cartesian dualism, which says that the proper study of medicine is an investigation of the body when the latter is viewed as a machine. A machine can exhaustively be broken down into its component parts and their respective functions. Hereby, we have so many specialties. In the same way, the human body can be broken down, analyzed in terms of its component parts and their respective functions, such as internal and external organs, the tissues and bones of which they are composed, the cells which make up the tissues, the molecules which constitute the cell, down to the atoms, the DNA sequences which make up the cells in the body. According to this ontology, which you know what that is now, a whole is no more than the sum of its parts. Once you've grasped the parts, you have grasped the whole. In other words, ontologically as well as logically, methodologically, and semantically, to maintain that whole can exist over and above their parts and their respective functions is to maintain something unintelligible or metaphysical in the abusive sense of the term. In contrast, epidemiology in terms of ontology makes sense only within a framework which is holistic, as it recognizes that the pattern of disease forms part of a system whose components are completely interrelated. So, as you can see, this ontological view based on Cartesian dualism of medicine is very different than an epidemiological view. And a monogenetic, conception of disease that informs clinical medicine is very different than what we want to be looking at here. So now let's talk a minute about the placebo conceptualization and a placebo effect. So that's generated years of conceptual confusion about what kinds of thing this is, okay? So example definitions of a placebo may refer to their inertness or pharmacological inactivity in relation to the condition they are given to. Similarly, Example definitions of placebo effects may refer to the subjectivity or the non-specificity of those effects. These types of definitions suggest the view that when given a placebo treatment, one may merely feel better while not really being better. The distinction at work in these types of definitions between active and inactive, inert, specific and non-specific, and subjective and objective have been problematized. For instance, if placebos are inactive or inert, then how do they cause placebo effects? More generally, there is scientific evidence from research investigating placebo phenomena which demonstrates that, for certain conditions such as pain, placebo effects can be both specific and objective in the conventional sense. Other attempts to define placebos and placebo effects, therefore, shift focus away from these distinctions and onto therapeutic effects that are caused or modulated by the context in which the treatment is delivered and the meaning that different aspects of treatment have for patients. The problems arising over the definition of placebos and their effects may be said to be the heritage of our Cartesian dualism, under which mind and matter are understood as two different substances. Furthermore, Cartesian dualism endorses a form of materialism which permits matter to have an effect on matter, and even matter to work on mind, which is the raison d'etre of psychopharmacology, but does not permit mind to have any effect on matter. This then means that medical science has difficulty in entertaining even the possibility that placebo effects are real, that they exist or may be objectively determinable, and finding such reports difficult, if not impossible, to comprehend and or accept. Yet, such reports, which appear to be genuine, pose a threat to Cartesian dualism, which provides the ontological underpinning for biomedicine, especially in its clinical domain. So, there is a placebo effect, and it may be real, and it might be mind over matter. So, but traditional philosophy of medicine does not necessarily accept that as being a real effect. Although most areas of study within the philosophy of medicine are concerned with matters of epistemology, there's a growing interest in the metaphysics of medicine, particularly the area in the idea of causality. Philosophers of medicine might not only be interested in how medical knowledge is generated, but also in the nature of such phenomena. Causation is of interest because the purpose of much medical research is to establish causal relationships, such as what causes disease or what causes people to get better. Thus, the idea of cause is central to this philosophy. The scientific processes used to generate causal knowledge gives clues to the metaphysics of causation. For example, the defining feature of randomized controlled trials is that they are thought to establish causal relationship, whereas observational studies do not. Therefore, metaphysically, the nature of causation has something to do with the nature of the RCT. It is not just a question of how RCTs generate the knowledge. In this instance, causation can be considered as something which is counterfactually dependent. The way RCTs differ from observational studies is that they have a comparison group in which the intervention of interest is not given. This aligns to a humane notion of causation, where a cause is considered when one event repeatedly follows another, and in a situation where the first event did not occur, neither would the second. The only things observed are in fact one event following another. The actual cause itself is unobservable, thus it is a medical physical notion. Metaphysicians wonder if there are alternative notions for the nature of causation. There are at least two different causal paradigms in biomedicine that have been identified. This humane linear monofactorial paradigm, championed mainly in clinical medicine through the randomized controlled trial, and it's very reductionist, and the nonlinear reciprocal multifactorial paradigm that's invoked in epidemiology. And this is a very holist view. This view, if correct, argues for a strong link between ontology and metaphysics on the one hand, and causality methodology on the other. Indeed, one might argue that each ontology entails its own methodology. So let's talk about the philosophy of nursing, which is actually quite distinct from the philosophy of medicine. In nursing, we've identified 4 fundamental patterns of knowing: empirics, the science of nursing; aesthetics, the art of nursing; personal knowledge, which nurses do bring to the table as part of their knowing; and ethics, the moral component. Each of us has an individual personal philosophy of nursing, and so I'd like you at this point to take 10 minutes to write your own personal philosophy of nursing practice and give thought to how, from your own perspective, nursing approaches these 2 parts of philosophy: ontology, ways of being, and epistemology, ways of knowing. So take that time now. Now that you have written your personal philosophy of nursing practice, did that philosophy include any of the 4 fundamental patterns of knowing that we did talk about previously? Empirics, the science of nursing; aesthetics, the art of nursing; your own personal knowledge; and ethics, that moral component. So look back, take a minute to look back at your own philosophy of nursing and circle those areas where these, and identify where these 4 fundamental patterns of knowing show up in your own personal philosophy of nursing. Not only is there your own philosophy of nursing, but there are professionals in the field that have proposed a nursing science philosophy. We are an emerging science, and we have not set yet a defined, definitive, standard, scientific understanding yet of our science. And so this is one proposed nursing science philosophy: human understanding as the premise. This incorporates a means for determining the interpretation of the phenomena of concern from the perspective of the client, the patient, or the care recipient. And it might be subjected to a hermeneutic analysis for their meaning, and followed by intersubjective consensual validation by the participants, and consensus among scholars, raised to a level of public information. So that's the public nature of human science knowledge. And it needs to be replicated. There may be idiosyncratic findings, and this is what is known as an emic perspective. So observation is foundational to our knowledge development. So we need systematic or systemic inquiry, subject to criticism, and publicized. So it's out there in the public realm, and rationality is foundational. We use theories and models in our research, and so that's a very important part of nursing science, that we do use theories. And so you've probably looked at some of those theories. You will be using those theories in your research. And explanatory power is very important. It's a proposed premise. It's important in both clinical and human science, as we can then have confidence in the treatments that we use. So evidence-based and some explanatory power. This is very important for nursing science. So this is a proposed nursing science philosophy from Susan Gortner way back in 1999, and we still see this as part of our proposed nursing science philosophy. Being that we are in a period of theory development in nursing, we are identifying our territory of the domain of nursing. And so part of that process is looking at our theory syntax, what theory is, how to critique it, how to develop it. And so sort of that first step is concept development. And so you have to uncover the phenomena that is embedded in nursing practice. And so most of the theory that we use in nursing practice are the middle range theories. These are much more circumscribed than grand theories. Earlier in our careers, we had a lot of grand theories, but they were not as concrete or as situation specific. And more of the middle range theories, they're more situation specific practice theories, and they have much higher explanatory value in understanding the different phenomena that are more easily applied in practice. They're also of interest scientifically because of their levels of abstraction. They're not as abstract as grand theories, and they're much more testable, they're intermediate in scope, and they're adequate in their empirical foundations. They're neither too broad nor too narrow or too circumscribed. They're sufficiently substantively specific. So researchers can test these theories, and they can expand the elements of the theories, develop measurement tools, and evaluate practical models based on the theories. And so we can study the effectiveness of these different middle range theories, and look at how these theories have been used as a guide for practice and research, and the publications that have emanated both in research and practical projects. And so there are a lot of philosophical debates about theory development and how it should be done. But most of us need to just be out there testing those theories. If you're interested in the philosophy of theory development, certainly that's a road you can go down in the academic realm. We need people to be doing both. But testing those theories is very much part of that philosophy. What the DNP is all about is getting out there and in practice and using a theory to test it in practice and use it and see if it works. So here's an example theory, Swanson's theory of caring. It was developed inductively through multiple qualitative studies. And the concepts within the theory are caring, knowing, being with, doing for, enabling, and maintaining belief. So caring is a nurturing way of relating to a valued other person towards whom one feels a personal sense of commitment and responsibility. And this is a middle range theory of caring that was developed with these five caring processes that are listed here. These are those concepts that are the five caring processes within the theory. So caring, knowing is a striving to understand an event as it has meaning in the life of the other person. It is the other person's experience of the situation that is the starting point for the understanding. And Swanson declares that it is important not to take anything for granted, but instead listen carefully to the other person and continuously look for clues and assess these. In this process, both providers and recipients are engaged. Being with is understood as being emotionally present for the other person to share feelings like joy or sorrow without burdening the one cared for, to see the other person and understand that his or her experiences are of great importance. Being with is a step beyond knowing and involves becoming emotionally open to the other person's reality, thus increasing the possibility of understanding the other person's situation. Doing for includes those actions that are helpful, protective, and or increase comfort, actions that the person normally would perform him or herself if it were possible to do so. The therapeutic acts of doing for include anticipating needs, comforting, performing competently and skillfully, and protecting the other person while preserving his or her dignity. Sounds a lot like nursing care, doesn't it? Enabling, and this is not the enabling that we think of in a negative sense. Enabling is facilitating the other person's passage through life's transitions and or unfamiliar events. The purpose is to facilitate the other's capacity to grow, heal, and or practice self-care. So it's getting them more into that, back into uh, life and into those transitions, and to learn self-care. So it involves focusing on the event, informing, explaining, supporting, allowing and validating feelings, generating alternatives, thinking things through, and giving feedback. Again, sounds like supportive nursing care. So in conclusion, different disciplines have come from the same roots historically, but have evolved to look at the world and their work from different philosophical perspectives. Nursing does not have a single philosophical perspective, but many, and is evolving in its theoretical and philosophical perspectives as it matures as a professional discipline. I've provided references for you, and hopefully you will find them useful. Thank you for your time.